Shalom, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to Saving Grace Torah Ministries. Today, we're tackling a subject that has shaped religious history and continues to influence the world of faith today. Religious syncretism. What is it? How has it shaped history? And why does the Bible warn so strongly against it? By the end of this teaching, you'll understand how syncretism dilutes true worship and why we must return to the unadulterated Word of YAH. Let's dive in. Religious syncretism is the merging of different religious beliefs, practices, and traditions into a new system. This blending happens for many reasons. Sometimes it's political, sometimes cultural, and often it's out of convenience. It can seem like a harmless effort to unify or relate to diverse groups, but it comes with spiritual consequences. Consider this: when faith is compromised to accommodate other beliefs, what happens to its purity? From the adoption of foreign gods to the blending of rituals and symbolism, syncretism creates a dangerous spiritual cocktail that leads to confusion and idolatry. Religious syncretism often results in the adoption of new religious rituals, festivals, or rites that combine elements of multiple faith traditions. The Bible shows us this time and time again. Scripture is filled with warnings and examples of what happens when Yah's people fall into syncretism. Now let's bring this closer to home. Christianity, along with many traditions within modern Christianity, have roots in religious syncretism. For example, Christmas, celebrated on December 25th, this date was chosen to align with the Roman festival of Sol Invictus, honoring the sun god. Symbols like the Christmas tree or evergreen trees have pagan origins. Evergreen trees have been used in pagan traditions for thousands of years to symbolize new life and fertility and to ward off evil spirits. Evergreens were believed to protect against witches, ghosts, evil spirits, and illness. Evergreens were a reminder of the Roman pagan sun god's promise to return and bring back the harvest and life. For example, the Druids, Celts, and Vikings decorated their homes with fir branches to symbolize everlasting life from their sun god, Balder. The Romans decorated their homes with fir branches during the festival of Saturnalia, which honored their god of agriculture and time. Egyptians brought green palm rushes into their homes and temples to symbolize the triumph of life over death. No matter how much one tries to Christianize the Christmas tree, whether by bowing down to place gifts under it or claiming it represents the gifts brought by the three wise men to Yahshua at his birth, a misconception, as this did not occur on the night of his birth, the truth remains: Christmas and its pagan symbols are deeply rooted in religious syncretism. Then there's Easter, a supposed celebration of Jesus' resurrection. Yet its timing and symbols, like eggs and rabbits, are linked to pagan spring festivals, honoring fertility goddesses like Yahshua, with origins dating back to the Babylonian pagan moon goddesses, mother god Semiramis. Semiramis became known as Ishtar, pronounced Easter, and her moon egg became Ishtar's egg. The Bible strictly condemns Ishtar or Easter worship. Let's look at Jeremiah chapter 7, verse 18 and 44 and 25. Jeremiah 7 and 18 states, "The children are gathering wood, the fathers are lighting the fire, and the women are kneading their dough to make cakes for the sovereigns of the heavens. and to pour out drink offerings to other mighty ones to provoke me. And then in Jeremiah chapter 44, verse 25, it reads, Thus spoke Yahweh of hosts, the Elohim of Israel, saying, You and your wives have spoken with your mouths and have filled with your hands, saying, We shall perform our vows that we have made to burn incense to the sovereignness of the heavens and pour out drink offerings to her. Then confirm your vows and perform your vows. Furthermore, the Council of Nicaea sought to create a clear divide between Hebrews, the Jews, and Christians, prohibiting Christians from eating unleavened bread during Passover or celebrating the day alongside the Jews. Instead, they established the date for Easter to align with a pagan fertility festival, further advancing religious syncretism. This deliberate separation is why most of Christianity today does not observe Passover, often dismissing it as a purely Jewish tradition, while celebrating the Messiah's resurrection on a completely different day. No matter if Christians call it Resurrection Sunday or Easter, the origins of this day are rooted in religious syncretism and raise important questions about their misalignment with Scripture. And it's not just holidays. The New Age movement has blended Eastern mysticism with Christian elements, introducing practices like energy healing, astrology, and meditation under the guise of spirituality. These mixtures dilute biblical truth and lead people away from Yahweh's commands. To understand how syncretism has shaped modern Christianity, we must look at the foundation of the Roman Catholic Church. The relationship between the Roman Catholic Church, the Emperor Constantine, and Christianity is deeply intertwined and marks a pivotal period in religious history. Before Constantine's reign, the people of the Way, which they were actually known as and not Christians, were a marginalized and often persecuted faith within the Roman Empire. However, everything changed in 312 AD when Constantine reportedly had a vision of a cross with the words, "In this sign conquer." Interpreting this as divine approval, Constantine converted to Christianity, leading a significant transformation. As Constantine's influence grew, the Roman Catholic Church emerged as a powerful entity, blending Christian doctrine with Roman political and cultural traditions. This included adopting pagan practices to make Christianity more palatable to pagan converts. The church incorporated elements from Roman religious traditions, such as festivals, for example, Christmas, aligning with Sol Invictus, and symbols such as crosses. When Constantine declared Christianity the favorite religion of Rome in the 4th century, it wasn't purely for spiritual reasons. It was a political move to unify the empire. It was deliberately shaped to reject the influence of those who were originally in covenant with Yahweh, the Hebrews or Jews. Rather than seeking Yahweh's truth or advancing his kingdom through the framework given to his chosen people, Rome created a faith system aligned with its own pagan practices, idolatries, and priorities. At the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, church leaders formalized doctrines that distanced people of the Way from its Hebrew roots of Torah observance. They moved the Sabbath to Sunday, aligning with Roman practices of sun worship, and replaced Passover with Easter. This deliberate separation from Hebrew roots created a faith that blended Roman paganism with teachings of Yahshua. This Romanized version of Christianity marginalized and distanced itself from the Hebraic roots of the faith, disregarding the fact that Yahshua came first to the lost sheep of Israel. Understanding this foundation is crucial because the effects of this Roman influence are still evident in much of modern Christianity. From altered doctrines to practices that diverge from Scripture, the legacy of this shift continues to shape how many believers perceive and practice their faith. It serves as a reminder of the importance of returning to the original teachings and intent of Yahweh's word, rooted in obedience to his commandments and the example set by Yahshua. Have you ever wondered about the symbols we see in many Christian churches? From the images of Jesus to crosses to the use of halos in art, many of these symbols have become staples of Christian tradition. But did you know that some of them have roots in earlier pagan practices and religious syncretism? Let's start with the halo, a common feature in Christian art used to signify holiness or divinity. While many assume this is a uniquely Christian concept, its origins trace back to pagan iconography. In ancient Greece and Rome, halos were often used in depictions of gods, emperors, and other divine figures to emphasize their elevated status. Take a look at this Roman coin. Notice the halo around the emperor's head. This symbol was a way to portray rulers as godlike, endowed with divine authority. When the Jews became intertwined with Roman culture, this artistic feature was adopted and repurposed to represent the holiness of Yahshua, Mary, and the saints. Now let's talk about one of the most recognized symbols in Christianity, the cross. For many, the cross is a representation of Jesus' sacrifice and redemption. But did you know that the symbol of the cross predates Christianity and has roots in pagan religious practices? When Christianity became the favorite religion of the Roman Empire under Constantine, the cross was adopted and transformed into a Christian symbol. Constantine himself reportedly saw a vision of a cross accompanied by the words, "In this sign conquer," which marked the beginning of the cross being used as a unifying emblem of the faith. However, this adoption also blended the symbol's pagan associations with its new Christian meaning, creating a form of syncretism. For many Roman converts, the cross retained echoes of its earlier significance as a symbol of power and divinity, rather than solely representing the sacrificial love of Yahshua. Today, the cross is widely used in Christian art, architecture, and even as a fashion statement. While some are misled in thinking that the cross can serve as a reminder of Yahshua's sacrifice, it's important to question whether its widespread use aligns with the biblical call to avoid idolatry or reliance on symbols. The cross has, as its origin, connections to paganism, and its potential to distract from true worship warrant careful consideration. Furthermore, early Christian art portrayed Yahshua in ways that reflected Jewish traditions and Middle Eastern culture. However, as Christianity spread and blended with European ideologies, his image began to change. Today, the familiar depictions of Jesus with light skin, blue eyes, and flowing hair are far removed from his likely appearance as a first-century Hebrew man from the tribe of Judah. We know, in fact, from the Bible that the Messiah was a Hebrew, and according to Revelations 1:14 through 15, had hair white like wool, as white as snow, eyes as a flame of fire, basically meaning dark colored eyes, and feet or skin like fine brass, as if they were burnt in a furnace. Now, anything burnt is what color? Burnt is a powerful blend of saturated orange and brown. Definitely doesn't sound white to me. How about brass? What color is brass? Brass is shiny or dull, dark, and has a yellowish golden color. So what color is burnt brass? It is dark brown. This syncretic transformation wasn't just aesthetic. It was part of a broader cultural shift that merged Christianity and Roman and European ideals. These depictions were misleading were shaped by the values of those cultures, not necessarily by scripture or historical accuracy. The adoption of pagan symbols wasn't limited to halos, crosses, and images of Jesus. Many other elements, such as the use of certain architectural designs, sunbursts, motifs, and even some holidays, as I spoke of earlier, reflect the influence of religious syncretism. These were often integrated as a way to make Christianity more appealing to pagan converts. While some may argue that these adaptations helped spread Christianity, we must ask, what happens when elements of other belief systems are blended with the truth of Yahweh's word? Does this enrich our faith, or does it dilute the purity of worship? For those who claim, I'm not Catholic, I'm not influenced by the Roman Catholic Church, take a moment to reflect on the foundation the church established and how it has shaped the practices many follow today. These changes shape the Christianity we see today, where many believers unknowingly follow traditions rooted in syncretism rather than scripture. Alarming forms of New Age spirituality have blended biblical teachings with Eastern religious philosophies, mysticism, and alternative spiritual practices such as meditation, energy healing, and astrology. This blending of faiths creates a syncretic version of the true faith of Yahweh and departs from biblical doctrines. Let's look at Colossians chapter 2 in verse number 8. Colossians chapter 2 in verse 8 says, "See to it that no one makes a prey of you through philosophy and empty deceit, according to the tradition of men, according to the elementary matters of the world, and not according to Messiah." For example, some New Age practices may incorporate ideas of reincarnation, karma, or personal divine consciousness, which are foreign to the foundation of our faith, but have been adopted by certain individuals who identify as Christians. Karma is based on the theological belief in reincarnation. The Bible rejects the idea of reincarnation, which is a core concept of karma. Hebrews 9 and verse 27 says that humans are only born and die once. As the faith spreads throughout Asia, Africa, and Latin America, it has encountered indigenous traditions and beliefs that have been absorbed into Christian practice. For instance, in Africa, certain charismatic Christian movements integrate traditional African spiritual practices such as the veneration of ancestors within a Christian framework. This syncretism allows African Christians to maintain cultural identity while embracing the Christian faith, a form of religious syncretism. In India, some Christian communities have blended Hindu customs such as festivals and clothing with their Christian worship practices. This cultural blending creates a form of syncretism that allows Christianity to coexist with local traditions. 1 Timothy 4 and 1 says, "But the Spirit distinctly says that in latter times some shall fall away from the belief, paying attention to misleading spirits and teachings of demons." Lastly, let's talk about one of the most glaring examples of modern syncretism, the prosperity gospel. This movement has taken root in many branches of Christianity, blending biblical concepts with the values of capitalism and consumer culture. At its core, the prosperity gospel teaches that faith in God will result in material wealth, personal success, and a life of comfort. But is this message truly biblical? The prosperity gospel is rooted in the rise of consumer culture and individualism, particularly in Western societies. In a world driven by capitalism, where success is measured by wealth and possessions, It's no surprise that some churches have adopted these values, merging them with the gospel message. The prosperity gospel relies on verses like Malachi 3 and 10, where Yahweh says, "Bring all the tithes into the storehouse, and let there be food in my house. And please prove me in this, said Yahweh of hosts, whether I do not open for you the windows of the heavens, and shall pour out for you boundless blessing." It's mind-boggling that some Christian preachers selectively choose passages from the Old Testament, specifically the Torah and the prophets, to teach and preach, often twisting these scriptures for their own benefit. This aligns with Peter's warning in 2 Peter 3 and 16, where he speaks of those who distort scripture to their own destruction. These Sunday worshiping preachers are quick to capitalize on Old Testament verses that suit their agendas, yet they fail to heed Yahshua's clear instruction in Matthew chapter 5, verse 17, where Yahshua says, "Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets." Many Christians embrace parts of the prophets that resonate with them while completely disregarding the Torah, which forms the foundation of those prophetic writings. A prime example is how Malachi chapter 3 and verse 10 is often misused. This verse is frequently cited in Sunday church services to justify tithes, offerings, and building fund contributions, sometimes even for extravagant expenses like a $65 million private jet. However, this interpretation misrepresents the true meaning of the text. Malachi chapter 3 and verse 10 is not about giving money to pastors or funding modern church projects. It is a command regarding tithing specifically to the Levites, the priestly tribe of Israel. Tithing in scripture refers to giving a tenth of the increase in herds, flocks, and harvests, not monetary income. These tithes were meant to support the Levites because they had no inheritance of land for farming or ranching. They were entirely dependent on the contributions of the other tribes to sustain themselves as they carried out their service to Yahweh. But these teachings around Malachi chapter 3 and verse 10 often distort scripture, focusing solely on financial gain while ignoring the broader context of Yahweh's promises and commands. Televangelists in the mid-20th century popularized the syncretic message, claiming that God's blessings are directly tied to financial giving and personal ambition. They promised followers that sowing a seed, often in the form of monetary donations, would result in a 100-fold return in material wealth. The problem with the prosperity gospel is that it fundamentally distorts Yahshua's teachings. Scripture tells us that Yahshua lived a life of humility and service, not wealth and luxury. In Matthew chapter 8, verse 20, he says, "Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head." His ministry wasn't about accumulating riches, but about spiritual transformation and obedience to the Most High, Yah. Let me be clear. I'm in no way stating or implying that you should live in poverty, struggling paycheck to paycheck, relying on food stamps, Section 8 housing vouchers, or Medicaid for your entire life. On the contrary, I fully support you striving for a better quality of life, living in a nice home, in a safe community, driving a reliable car, wearing good clothes, having savings, investing in a 401k, and more. These things are not inherently wrong or unbiblical. What I am against is the syncretic misuse of scripture to justify materialism or modern agendas, often at the expense of Yahweh's truth. This manipulation distorts Elohim's word, which deserves to be understood and respected in its original context. As Yahshua himself taught, "Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets," in Matthew 5 and 17. The law and the prophets remain vital, continually pointing us back to obedience, faithfulness, and a covenantal relationship with Yahweh. It's not wealth or comfort that Yah condemns, but the distortion of his word and the neglect of his commandments. True prosperity comes from aligning our lives with his will, walking in his ways, and honoring him in all we do. The prosperity gospel shifts the focus from Yahweh's kingdom to earthly success. It equates blessings with material possessions, undermining the biblical call to deny ourselves, take up your stake, and follow Yahshua. This syncretic message can have devastating effects on believers. Many are led to think that faith is weak if they don't experience financial success, creating a cycle of guilt and disillusionment. Others are manipulated into giving beyond their means, thinking it will unlock Elohim's blessings. But scripture teaches us to find contentment in Yahweh, not in material things. Philippians 4:12 and 13 says, I know what it is to be humbled, and I know what it is to have in access. In any and every situation, I have learned both to be filled and to be hungry, both to have in access and to be in need. I have strength to do all through Messiah who empowers me. This contentment comes from trusting in Yah's provision, not chasing wealth. Why is syncretism so dangerous? First, it distorts Yahweh's truth. Let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 12 in verse 30 through 31. Guard yourself that you are not ensnared to follow them after they are destroyed from before you, and that you do not inquire about their mighty ones, saying, how did these nations serve their mighty ones? And let me do so too. Do not do so to Yahweh your Elohim, for every abomination which Yahweh hates, they have done to their mighty ones, for they even burn their sons and daughters in the fire to their mighty ones. Deuteronomy 12:30 through 31 warns us not to inquire about other gods or worship Yahweh in their ways. Yet syncretism invites foreign practices into our worship, creating spiritual confusion. Second, it misleads future generations. When faith is compromised, the truth of Yahweh's word becomes diluted, leaving our children with a fractured understanding of who he is and what he desires from us. The Most High calls us to exclusive worship, as seen in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4 and 5. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our Elohim, Yahweh is one, and you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, and with all your being, and with all your might. Deuteronomy 6:4 and 5 is not negotiable. So what can we do? First, return to the Word of YAH. Study Scripture, all of Scripture, which includes the Torah and the prophets, diligently, and examine your practices. Are they rooted in biblical truth, or do they stem from traditions of men? Second, align your worship with Yahweh's commandments. Celebrate his appointed times, such as the Sabbath, and the biblical feasts, such as Passover, instead of man-made traditions like Easter and Christmas. Third, we must reject this syncretic blending of faith and consumerism. Yahshua's message is one of humility, service, and eternal perspective, not a focus on personal gain. Let's return to the biblical truth that Yahweh's blessings are not measured by wealth, but by obedience to his commandments and characteristics of spiritual fruit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, and faithfulness. In Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 through 21, Yahshua tells us, Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Let's align our hearts with Yahweh's eternal purpose, not with the fleeting promises of worldly success. Fourth, it's not about rejecting art or beauty, but about examining the origins and purpose of these symbols. Are they helping you draw closer to Yahweh, or are they remnants of a history that compromised his truth for cultural acceptance? As believers, we are called to worship Yahweh in spirit and in truth. Exodus chapter 20 verse 4 reminds us, "You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on the earth beneath." When symbols or images rooted in pagan traditions enter our worship, they risk becoming a distraction from true faith. Finally, be courageous and standing apart from the world. As Yahshua said in John chapter 17 and verse 17, "Sanctify them by the truth. Your word is truth." Let's reject syncretism and worship Yahweh in spirit and in truth. Thank you for watching. If this message resonates with you, please share it. Together, let's return to the roots of our faith, honoring Yahweh as he commands and imitating Yahshua. Peace, blessings, and joy